I often describe myself as someone who only likes to do things once I know I'm already good at them. So for me, failure is kind of a bad word. I definitely struggle to lean into the more positive version, which is the kind of innovation and learning that can come from failure, or like the risk taking that is associated with failure, that I think is positive and we should do more of. But on a personal level, I still really grapple with the idea that failure could be something positive. It's like hard for me.
Um, the first thing that happens to me, even when hearing the word or thinking, trying to imagine what it means to me, is that my stomach kind of clenches. It's a physical, embodied sort of discomfort. And I think that that can be both a blessing and a curse because as I've gotten older and learned to like notice that, it can sometimes forestall or prevent. If I address it in the moment, I can sometimes not fail the things that make me uncomfortable. I mean, if something's making me uncomfortable, I need to notice it and learn from how to deal with it, like literally in the moment, um, rather than the the more typical response, which is to just pretend it isn't happening.
I also think a lot about how in philanthropy in particular, but I think this is true in a lot of sort of aspects of our society. Who gets to fail? Who has the privilege of that kind of risk taking and experimentation? And in our sector, this idea that nonprofits or our grantee partners are um, not in a position often to take place big bets or take big risks, because failure for them has such immediate and direct impact on them, their communities, their livelihoods. Whereas in philanthropy, we can sort of have this permission to take big swings, and that ultimately we're not necessarily judged for failure in the same way that our grantee partners would be. And so, how do we hold the responsibility of that more appropriately, and again, like, try to, as my mom was saying, kind of build the kinds of relationships where we can both share risk in a tangible way with our partners, but also find appropriate ways for that to support them in risk taking, where we can take the account, take the failure hit, and not them. So whether that looks like, continuing to give grants to a group that is struggling, or um, to, be in more of a capacity building partnership where if a partner's done done something bold and creative and it didn't land for whatever reason, a campaign they launched that didn't pan out, or something like that, that we're in a supportive relationship around that risk taking. This journey that I have been on, around the original idea of Kataly, was decentering ourselves as donors, or decentering our voice, because we didn't want to reinforce these like negative patterns of power or power over, or sway the appetite for risk, say, of our team or of our grantees through being kind of the conservative, gatekeeping, traditional philanthropic donor energy. Um, and and yet, over time and over building relationships with the team and with grantees, and doing work in the donor funder organizing space, I'm really learning the value of staying in the conversation and not always being in the room, not always being in the decision making seat, but staying at the table in ways that allow me to be able to just tell stories from what Kataly has been learning, and be at least in relationship in ways that both hopefully allow me to be a better donor organizer, but also help me just be a human being in relationship with projects that are really amazing and people. And it's a fine line, as my mom said, between kind of leaning in and being an ally and in solidarity, in a solidarity stance, but always being mindful of the unintended ways, our, whether it's, our white privilege, wealth privilege, just our lived experience, or our judgment, might not be what's most useful at the time, in solving a problem. And so just being engaged, but in a way that is, aware and thoughtful. I think that has been a big learning, and is definitely at my learning edge. I mean, it's kind of a, constant process, but that's been like a, something really positive and really constructive, and I do feel like I've had failures in that too, places where I'm like, oh, I think I overstepped, or failure in terms of just feeling uncomfortable and feeling sad about that, feeling like I want to be more engaged or more connected or be invited to something, and then feeling feelings about it when, because we've built this trusting relationship where we've asked the team to tell us when to lean in and when to step back, that doesn't always feel good, or I've had to kind of feel, um, just tension sometimes around really trusting that I'm gonna get, the right kind of feedback, and feel like, it would be failure if I was, you know showing up in places where it wasn't helpful, and it's failure if I'm not showing up in places where it would be helpful. And so it's kind of there's a little bit of a dynamic tension there, and I said at the beginning, I'm someone who doesn't like to do things when I don't already know if I'm doing it right. So that is at my learning edge, but it's been a good place for me to grow.
Yeah, when I was younger, I always knew that site visits, I hated them. I hated them, and I didn't know why. I didn't understand that I was responding to the fact that I felt people were forced into this sort of deferential, oh my God, the money people are coming, and no, they were distracted from their real work. And I think that had I didn't have, in the 90s, 80s and 90s, I didn't have the language to understand or speak about or deal with those feelings. So I just refused to go. Um, and that's clearly a missed opportunity because, if I'd figured it out sooner, I'd be further along today. Um, but now I always try to, I mean, it's not, as you said, it's not obvious when is the right time to step in. And I think it's definitely a learning edge for all of us.
And, it's such a gift to get to be in relationship with the folks on the ground doing the work. We learn so much, we feel connected, we are reminded that our liberation is tied to each other, that this isn't work they're doing for them, and that we somehow are outside of that work. We're all part of the systems and structures that need changing. And so I feel like that mindset helps to push us out of those, roles and that dynamic. But again, I don't feel like it's work that any of us can do on our own. It requires a lot of trust on both sides. And I never take that for granted. I'm always very grateful when organizers take the time to just like actually build a relationship with me or any of us on the board who, um, you can feel the difference when someone's like, oh, let's hang out and get to know each other. How are your kids? And it's not just a business relationship. I just really appreciate that. And I try to offer the same respect and interest and intention. And, it's a work in progress. It's kind of an experiment in certain ways, but just really grateful for the relationships we have been able to build, and think that when there is that trust, a lot more is possible, and we can take more risks together because we trust each other, and there's a sense of shared, purpose.
Yeah, to try to get to the point where your grantees know that they can come to you when they have um, scary things happening. A lot of donors don't provide that kind of safe space um, for that hard sharing where they really do need help, or they really are in trouble, or they have um, they need help. It's a hard that's a sign that you have succeeded, I think, as a grantor when you're the safe space that an organization can come to if they're I mean, even in some of our situations recently where our grantees have been doxxed and threatened and served papers, and um, can be a really impossible thing to share with the donor unless your donor is a a trusted person or organization.
That makes me think, Mom, about what we've been talking a lot about really recently, which is just the conditions right now for doing our work, working for social justice, for collective liberation, and a lot of conversations have been happening around protecting philanthropy or protecting the right to give. And as
Hmm.
important as that is, I think we've been part of a group of folks in philanthropy who are trying to remind the field that what we really need to be working on is protecting the right to organize and the right to protest and the right to do the frontline work that grantees and nonprofits and community leaders are leading. And so that's the type of dynamic and kind of moment where I think it's important to yeah, have a voice to advocate for not just the protection of philanthropy, but the protection of the whole field that we are a part of, and to not, and just to kind of be careful not to pretend that we could protect philanthropy somehow and still do our social justice organizing work if we're not also out there protecting the rights of the folks on the ground doing this work.
Um, it's hard to it's hard to be brave. It's really hard right now to know whether you're making a decision out of fear and being overly cautious, or making a decision that is um, bold, but also takes into account things that need to happen in order to protect yourself and your grantees and your process. That line between um, being um, risk taking and risk averse. For the you have to those have to be for the right reasons. It's harder now than I think it's ever been to navigate that and have it be. I mean, if we all hide under a rock, that would be failure. And if we put ourselves out in a way that is dangerous or I mean, we may get to the point where we have to be more provocative and less cautious. But with eyes wide open about who we are putting at risk, who are we protecting? If we don't resist.
The more we can be honest about where our edges are and what's hard, then the more we can improve. And if we are comfortable talking about failure, then we're more likely, as my mom pointed out, to have partners and grantees who are comfortable talking about their own challenges. So I think it's a form of leadership to be more open about what's hard. I think it'll make us ultimately be able to do better work and do better work together and build better relationships. But it's not without its fear factor. So it takes some guts.